Hey, I'm Matt Stoller, author of Monopoly-focused Substack newsletter Big and an antitrust policy analyst. I have a great segment for you today on this big breakdown. It's an antitrust analysis of the proposed merger between the PGA Tour and the Saudis' LIV Golf, which was announced about 2 weeks ago. It actually already feels like quite a while, and the narrative on the deal since it was first announced has completely changed, so I'm going to go into that as well. Okay, so let me give you the TLDR. The deal is already falling apart. Now, first, let's start at the beginning. Here's CNBC's David Faber going on the details of what happened the day of the announcement.
The PGA Tour and its Saudi-backed competitor LIV Golf, along with Europe's DP World Tour, have agreed to merge in expectation of creating a global entity for the game of golf. The agreement, which is not yet a definitive agreement, ends the hostility between LIV and the PGA, along with the litigation between the parties, and it calls for the giant Saudi sovereign wealth fund, PIF, which created LIV, to invest significant, I'm told, what will be billions of dollars into the new entity. That's over time.
Okay, so it was a big deal. It was a huge deal when it was announced. Globe changing, the Saudis geopolitical, like changing the world of golf, like Donald Trump was involved. It's sort of a massive, massive thing. But here is the gist of the terms. So this was according to The Athletic, as best as they could tell. Okay, so the tour is receiving upwards of $2 to $3 billion, plus all the litigation between the two parties, and there's a lot of it, and it's very bitter, is going away. Now, the background to this deal, as far as we can tell, and here's important context, is that the PGA Tour has been the ruler of pro golf for many decades. In 1994, for example, the Federal Trade Commission actually investigated the PGA Tour for monopolization. But Congress back then was, as one would expect, a fan of old rich golfers. And Congress actually threatened to cut the budget of the antitrust enforcers by 20% if they went ahead with a case. So the FTC said, okay, we'll drop the complaint. The vote was 4-0. And until 2021, that's pretty much how things in the world of pro golf remained. Then the Saudi government, through its Public Investment Fund, or PIF, decided to finance a competitor to the PGA Tour. It's called LIV Golf. Now, LIV Golf started luring top players and putting on rival events, and it created competition in the space. It wasn't profitable. It was a sort of a geopolitical push, but it did create real competition for the first time in many decades. Now, part of this is that the two entities have been in a bitter antitrust suit over the nature of this competition, and it's been going on for about a year. There are allegations of anti-competitive behavior on the part of the PGA Tour, and the PGA Tour itself is under investigation by the government yet again. Now the story gets weirder. As I noted, Donald Trump is involved, with his properties hosting LIV Golf events put on by his Saudi allies. He really wants in on professional golf money and PGA Tour prestige. Now, if you read the antitrust complaint filed against the PGA Tour last year, it seems pretty clear that the PGA Tour has been a problematic ruler of pro golf going back decades, but especially now when they actually face a rival. So, quote, members of the tour receive a substantially lower percentage of the tour's revenues than professional athletes in other major sports, end quote. That's what the players argued. When LIV began challenging the PGA Tour, it, quote, threatened lifetime bans on players who play in even a single LIV Golf event, and threatened sponsors, vendors, and agents to coerce players to abandon opportunities to play in LIV Golf events, end quote. Now, this bitterness, but also the general competition is consistent with pretty much all sports leagues. Rivalry in sports leagues tends to push up compensation for players, and consolidation tends to do the opposite. It's what you'd expect with a monopoly. When you're selling sports services as an athlete to one entity, you're a price taker. When you have a choice of two, they have to bid for your services. Okay, so to ward off the new competition, the strategy of the PGA Tour, they want to maintain their monopoly, was to denigrate LIV Golf as funded by murderous thugs. And because of the Saudi government's bad track record here on human rights, I mean, they're murderous thugs, a lot of players refused to play in the new league. So this merger shocked everyone who believed the PGA Tour's human rights rhetoric. Those who believed it, of course. Now, on a broader level, the public discussions were initially quite frantic about the rise of Saudi influence. Here's a headline in the New York Times the day of the deal. Oh my God, the Saudis are so influential now, like they weren't influential before. I saw Tom Friedman and Andrew Ross Sorkin on CNBC the morning of the announcement, wondering whether the Saudis could do the same thing to the NBA or other sports leagues as part of this giant geopolitical play to control athletics, as if athletics is not already dominated by huge sums of money and corporate power. But let's ask a different question. Is this deal legal? Is it actually going to happen? After all, we have antitrust laws that prohibit illegal mergers. There is a lot of gray area in antitrust law. You know, some mergers, it's not totally clear that it's going to reduce competition, so it's not clear that the Clayton Act applies. That's what a lot of cases are about. But here's the thing. When two companies, the only two companies, want to merge to a monopoly, and they announce it as such, that's just a violation of black letter law. And did that happen here? Well, for that, I'll go to the head of the PGA Tour, Jay Monahan, who said that this merger is good for his organization because it allows them to, quote, take the competitor off the board, end quote. Okay, when a corporate leader publicly says the point of a merger is to monopolize a market and eliminate a competitor, I mean, that's pretty crazy. And I can only imagine what's in the private correspondence that usually lawyers go through when putting together an antitrust case. Now, it's not just me saying this. All of the antitrust nerds that I'm friends with or that I know were in total disbelief at the audacity of these deal makers. So scholar Herb Havenkamp, who's, generally monopoly friendly and very well respected in the antitrust bar, said that this merger would be problematic in at least 3 markets. So live attendance, TV broadcast rights and advertising, and golfer compensation. Now, given that LIV Golf and the PGA Tour have been bidding aggressively for the services of golfers, it seems pretty obvious that this deal will monopolize at least one of those markets. And that's how antitrust works. It's about markets, specific markets. So Herb Havenkamp puts out 3 markets, but others can do it differently. Everybody agrees that there's just a monopoly going on here. So now, it is unusual for a corporate leader to announce he's doing a deal to remove a competitor. As Bloomberg reporter Leah Nyland reported, one reason he might be doing that is because, quote, no antitrust lawyers were involved in the PGA Tour LIV discussions. That's crazy. Every merger of any size involves at least calling an antitrust lawyer and saying, hey, what do you think? But not this one. And so this choice to just not even talk to an antitrust lawyer when they actually have antitrust lawyers on retainer suing each other, it just doesn't make any sense. Both the PGA Tour and LIV Golf, they've got a big fight, and they didn't ask one of their antitrust lawyers to attend a meeting where they sought to merge to a monopoly. They also have deal-maker lawyers, and it's not, whether they're not specialists in antitrust, they know that, 2-to-1 merger is illegal. So, what is going on here? And then there's the announcement itself, which is pretty vague. Apparently, after saying it's a merger, the PGA Tour is now saying it's not a merger. It's an alliance, or it's a joint company in which they will put all assets, or maybe it's a framework. Who knows? But one very clear point for the PGA Tour is that whatever this deal is, it is intended to remove a competitor. And legally, that is what matters. So as a result, most antitrust lawyers who have commented on this deal publicly, from the far right to the far left, have scoffed at the very notion that this deal, as announced, is legal. So I'm going to put a couple of tweets on the board. Here's the former White House competition chief, Tim Wu. He's a Columbia law professor, focuses on antitrust. He tweeted that the deal won't survive. Libertarian antitrust lawyer Josh Wright, who's at George Mason, he mocked the combination. And indeed, it is a joke. Indeed, it's so stupid that the PGA Tour and the Saudis have managed to turn Congress somehow against rich white golfers. That is an accomplishment. So Senator Richard Blumenthal, for instance, has demanded that the Antitrust Division look into the merger. The Antitrust Division is looking into the merger, and now the deal is probably going to face a challenge from enforcers. It's almost impossible not to. It's just disrespectful to just merge to monopoly, like doing a giant cocaine deal in front of a police station. There's also going to be a congressional hearing. Now, a different lawyer pointed out that it actually gets worse because it's not just the Department of Justice with jurisdiction, but Great Britain and the European enforcers also have jurisdiction because, it's a global combination. It's a global monopoly. So Now, you can get around antitrust if they just pass a law saying that antitrust doesn't apply in this particular case, and that has happened. So in 1966, when the AFL and the NFL wanted to merge football leagues, Congress actually had to grant an exemption to antitrust law. As a side note, the politician who did that was from Louisiana, and he said, if I'm gonna grant this exemption, you have to start a football team in New Orleans, and that's why we have the New Orleans Saints. So you can thank antitrust for the New Orleans Saints. At any rate, the point here is that unless America, the American government, the European Union, and the British government all grant an antitrust exemption, as Congress did for football in '66, the deal seems kind of crazy. So, okay, to put it nicely, the legal situation is dicey, and that's starting to have impacts on the discussions of whether the deal will actually go through. So large Wall Street players are now possibly involved on the side of the actual golfers. So the legal situation is, to be nice, dicey. And that's starting to have impacts on the discussions of whether the deal will actually go through. Large Wall Street players are now possibly involved on the side of the golfers. Let's take a listen to CNBC talking about this.
I'm also told that Patrick Cantlay, one of the players who's also a player director, whose sponsor includes Goldman Sachs, is probably getting some good advice from the likes of Goldman Sachs here and has been an important voice here in terms of what are we going to get as players here for stepping up and saying yes to all of this, given that we were willing to accept a lot less to stay at the PGA, so to speak, than go to LIV Golf.
In light of how a lot of the players, like top player Rory McIlroy, are responding to player compensation in this deal, it's hard to see how it's going to go smoothly for all sides without a lot more money being put into the actual arrangement. So let's take a listen to what he said.
Should the golfers who maybe stayed loyal and turned down LIV, should they be made whole financially?
I mean, the simple answer is yes. The complex answer is how does that happen?
Let's just be real here. There's no actual reason to allow the merger. It doesn't have to happen. Unlike team sports such as football or baseball, golf is actually a sport of individuals, and it doesn't actually require leagues. It's more like boxing. You can have boxing matches without having boxing leagues. You can have lots of different types of tournaments. You don't need just one league for golf. In fact, that's what a bunch of the antitrust complaints and investigations have been about from the 90s to today. Now, obviously, the PGA Tour and Saudi leaders understand at some level these legal and operational realities. The people who run the PIF are sophisticated, so is the PGA Tour. So what's really going on? Well, honestly, I don't quite know. One possibility is that the Saudi government, which funded LIV Golf through its sovereign wealth fund, is trying to avoid embarrassment. In February, a court ruled that the Saudis had to make their emails public in their antitrust suit with the PGA Tour. They claimed, oh, we're a government, we don't have to do that, we're not like a regular company, governments do have what's called sovereign immunity. But a judge said, look, you have sovereign immunity when it's government business, but you guys are running a golf league. That's more like, you're more like a corporation. So yeah, you have to tell us what's going on, you have to give us your emails. And the Saudis don't want that. Neither does the PGA Tour, but they knew it was going to happen. The Saudis didn't. So one thing that's going on here is that they're ending all the litigation between LIV Golf and the PGA Tour, and the Saudi emails will remain private. It's true that there could be a merger challenge, and so bad emails could come out, even if they try to bring this merger to a completion. But a more likely path is that the Antitrust Division at the Department of Justice investigates the deal, the Saudis drop their merger attempt before the trial, and LIV Golf shuts down. There could be some sort of Saudi investment in the PGA Tour later. Meanwhile, everyone gets the headlines now, which obscures the reality that the Saudis don't want emails made public, and they can blame the Antitrust Division for the collapse of LIV Golf, even though what's really going on is LIV Golf was never profitable in the first place. At any rate, something weird is going on here, and if the deal goes through, which I don't think it will, it's likely because of a high-level political decision from the Biden administration, the EU, and the British government to move it through as a favor to the Saudis. I don't think that's going to happen. It's easier just let LIV Golf die and then have the Saudis make a separate, unrelated investment in a few years, or really not even do that. There are a lot of other possibilities. Maybe they'll find a way to do some sort of divestment or change the terms to make the deal palatable, though honestly, I can't see how they do that and make it legal. But when you're dealing with Saudi Arabia, Donald Trump, global sports, You can get to things like money laundering, arms dealing, espionage, weird diplomacy, and all sorts of other conspiratorial stuff. And I don't like speculating on that because it's like seeing ripples on an ocean and trying to guess what's happening beneath. But one thing I can say is that this deal, in its current form, doesn't make any sense. And that's starting to become clear. Thanks for watching this big breakdown on the Breaking Points channel. If you'd like to know more about big business and how our economy really works, you can sign up in the description below for my market power focused newsletter, Big. Thanks and have a good one.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.